So basically these are the steps of QBD, what we are talking about: QTPP, CQA, then your CMA, what I told you, the CPP, I told you CPP. CFP means you will also see the formulation variables that we will talk about. I mean, these will be the CMAs, CFVs, CPPs. Then your design space will come, then your control strategy, and finally your life cycle management. Life cycle management means whenever the product is in the market, but even in that case, you can also imply your QBDs also. I mean, to more efficiently improve the product. This is called life cycle management. I mean, for example, a product is running from 2 or 3 years in the market, and still you want to increase the quality of that product. You can obviously do some modifications. For example, today you are compressing your tablets at machine RPM, what we call machine tablet compression machine. It is rotating at 20 RPM. Fine, you want to improve the efficiency, you want to reduce the time of your compression time, you want to increase the RPM of your machine, you want to increase from 20 RPM to 25 RPM. So you will evaluate all your CQAs, your CPPs, and then you will say to the regulatory agency, you will submit the data that previously our manufacturing record was saying that this was our control strategy now, but we have also evaluated in our case, we are increasing the RPM, and all the tests which we are doing to validate all the critical quality attributes, they are within the specifications. So that is we call as life cycle management. Now first of all, we will talk about in depth about QTPP, what is quality target product profile. According to ICH Q8, so basically ICH, you all know, ICH Q8, Q9 and Q10, they are revolving around your drug product development, your risk assessment, your risk management. So these are the important guidelines which you can refer: ICH Q8, Q9 and Q10. So they are very important guidelines. But based on ICH Q8 revision 2, QTPP is prospective summary of quality characteristics of a drug product that ideally will be achieved to ensure desired quality, taking into account safety, efficacy of drug product. Basically, it is a tool for setting the strategy of drug product. So QTPP is nothing but your tool for setting the strategy of your drug development to ensure your safety, efficacy. For example, a typical QTPP for an immediate release dosage form, what it would be? I mean, you will tell about the tablet characteristics, how should be the size, shape of the tablet, what are the physical parameters of your tablet dosage forms. Identification in tablets, generally you have your active ingredient, whether you are able to identify that active ingredient in your tablets, your assay values, your uniformity. I mean, if you talk about tablet, then you talk about your content uniformity, your purity, or we can say the impurity levels. Stability will be very important whenever you are manufacturing a dosage form. Your target will be that it should be stable at a particular defined shelf life. For example, you want to say that my product should be stable at least for 2 years. So that will be your target. Also your dissolution, if for example you are not able to achieve dissolution more than 85% at 30 minutes or 45 minutes as per your specification, though, so it is not immediate release. Are you getting my points? And those target, the target should not be as per your understanding. The target, whenever you are setting a target, those targets should comply with your pharmacopoeias or the guidelines which are there in your monographs in your US FDA. So you cannot say that I want a tablet where the assay values will be 80%. No, that is not the case. Your target should be in line with the monographs. It should be in line with your guidelines. So, for example, you are saying that my target for immediately is the DT should be 60 minutes. No, it cannot be. The target whichever you are achieving, that should be complying with your monographs. Stability. You will say that I don't want stability for 2 years, I want stability for 6 months. So that is not the case. You need to have shelf life of at least 2 years, so that you can increase the shelf life. You can say my target will be 5 years, so regulatory will accept it. But if you talk about that my target will be 6 months or 7 months, no, they will never accept your product. Dissolution. You will have to define the dissolution specifications as per the monograph. So the targets, it is not as per your understanding. Those targets should be as per the monograph, but you can increase your target. For example, now I'm saying that as per the specifications, the SA value is 92110. You can increase the target. You can say that no, I want a tablet in which my target SA value should be 95 to 105. I'm changing those limits. So regulatory will definitely accept it, because you are keeping your targets very defined. So this is what QTPP is. This is a table. I have taken it from the USFDA example. They have very well, they have a document on the website also. You can go and Google it, the QBD example for immediate release. So I have taken this table from that. For example, if you talk about your QTPP elements, whenever you are preparing a dosage form, you need to first of all design your QTPP, as I already told you, but you should be putting it in a tabular form. So if we talk about the QTPP elements, what will be your QTPP elements? For example, dosage form, whatever you are preparing, your target is tablet, and then for every target you have to provide a justification that is required. So justification is pharmaceutical equivalence required, same dose, because this example is for a generic product. So your justification will be by product is pharmaceutical equivalence. There are two equivalencies. One is your pharmaceutical equivalency and other is your bioequivalency. So whenever you are talking about a generic product, you should keep in mind there are two equivalencies. One is pharmaceutical equivalence and second is bioequivalence. Pharmaceutical equivalence means the same dosage form, the same dosage design, or the same strength of that dosage form. That is your pharmaceutical equivalence. In terms of your pharmaceutical, I mean, whenever you are working for generics, it should be pharmaceutical equivalence, and other important is your bioequivalence. Then you say that yes, my product is generic product. Then your dosage design, whatever design you want, your target is as per your RLD, your target is immediate release. Immediate release design needed to meet label claims. Then route of administration. Obviously, if you are working for tablet, it can be oral, so it is also pharmaceutical equivalence. Your dosage strength, whichever strength you are working, for example 20 mg, so justification will come pharmaceutical equivalence, same strength. Pharmacokinetics. Now this pharmacokinetics means in terms of your bioequivalence, I mean how the drug will behave when it comes in the blood, and whenever you are identifying in the plasma, how the drug is behaving in vivo. Whatever we are talking about, this assay values, your impurity level values, your dissolution values, these are all these are in vitro studies. But when we talk about in vivo studies, means the studies which you are doing on the volunteers, so it will be pharmacokinetics or bioequivalence. So what are the parameters that you do for bioequivalence studies? For example, your Tmax will be there, your area under the curve can be there. So we have a separate section of bioequivalence. I will not go in detail, but for your understanding, it should be equal in terms of bioequivalence. And what are the parameters which are done? Generally your Cmax values, your AUC values. So these are your parameters which you need to check to identify whether your drug product is bioequivalence with the RLD or not. Then stability. Your target will be at least 24 months. So justification is whether you can be equivalent to the shelf life that the RLD has claimed, or you can do better. If, for example, the RLD is saying that my product is stable up till 24 months, but if you set a target that no, I want a product which should be stable up to 36 months, you can very well do that. Then in terms of drug product quality attributes, your physical attributes means your size, shape and all, your identification, whether you are able to identify that product or not in the your drug API in that drug product or not, the assay values, the content uniformity, the dissolution values, the degradation products, residual solvents. So these residual solvents, for example in coating you are using any solvent, for example IPA. So after the drying process, whatever the solvent is remaining after the drying process, this is called residual solvent. Or in some cases you are doing granulation with the organic solvent. For example, you are dissolving the binder in IPA, you are doing the granulation process. After you have done your granulation process, you want to dry your granules, and whatever the remaining solvents, the ppm levels, parts per million, the solvent level which is remaining after drying, that is called your residual solvents. So basically your the ICH has set some limits of these solvents. They have categorized these solvents whether it is carcinogenic or not. So that is called residual solvents. The water content values, what should be the water content values should be there. The microbial limits. So these are the drug product quality attributes. The container closure systems, I mean if you talk about the packaging, whichever is there, your administration concurrence with labeling, I mean if you talk about, for example, similar food effect as RLD, for example if the RLD has said that there are chances that the drug absorption will decrease when you take food, so even in your generic product you should have a similar effect as your RLD, because whenever you are doing the bioequivalence studies, so regulatory what they generally ask that whenever you are doing bioequivalence studies you should be doing it in a fasting state. I mean at least for 8 hours you should not eat anything, you can drink small amount of water, that is called your fasting state. And the fed state in which the patient, they will get a specified amount of meal in a specified amount of portions. I mean how much fat will be there in their diet, how much protein will be their diet, how much carbs will be their diet. So a particular diet they will give them, and after 2 hours they will give the tablets to the patients. So bioequivalence needs to be done in both fasting state as well as the fed state after eating. So that effect we need to compare. So that should be similar for both your generics whenever you are doing the bioequivalence studies for your generics. And then finally alternative method of administration, known. Your target will be known because also the RLD does not have claimed any other method of administration. So this is just about QTPP. I mean what is QTPP, what the target you are going to set, and what is your justification. Whenever you are setting a target you need to provide the justification that why I have kept this particular kind of target. So whenever you have designed your QTPP, you have your target with you, that what will be my steps to achieve those targets. Okay, so everyone is clear about QTPP? Nishant, do you have any question? So we have finished our QTPP. What do you mean by QTPP? Now we are going to discuss about critical quality attributes. So basically CQA is defined as a physical, chemical, biological or microbiological property or characteristics that should be within an appropriate limit, range or distribution to ensure the desired product quality. So basically whatever the attributes which are critical to your quality, those are called critical quality attributes. Whether it is your physical parameter, whether it is your chemical parameter, it may be your biological, it may be your microbiological, anything which is important for your quality of product. For example, in this table, what I have separated, for example, your drug substance, what we call as a chemical or the active ingredient. What are the critical quality attributes of a drug substance? First of all, the appearance. Appearance is very important because today the vendor is saying that my API is white to off-white. The next day when he is applying a different lot, the color changes. So somehow it will impact the quality. Why the color has changed? Maybe due to the any uncertain things that happen during the synthesis or during the handling, whatever. So the appearance is very important for any drug substance. The particle size, as I already told, that particle size, why it is very important. And just to ask, I mean, what do you mean by three tire particle size? Can anyone type in the chat box three tire particle size? We discussed earlier. What do you mean by three tire particle size? It's not necessary that you need to type it. You can just unmute your mic and you can speak. Okay. So particle size is very important. So D10, D50, D90, it is called three tire. Means your specification limit is three things: D10, D50, and D90. Then your morphic form means your polymorphic form. Which polymorphic form you are going to give to your customers, or which polymorphic form you have a control. For example, today you have a polymorphic form which is alpha, which will be having some certain kind of chemical properties. The solubility will be different. If you change the polymorphic form, the chemical properties can change, the solubility can change. So the quality attributes which is important for chemical substance is your polymorphic form, the water content. You don't have the control on water content, then ultimately it will be out of specifications, and the end customers who want to produce a drug product, they will, they need to also change the potency values as per the, if your water content values are changing. If in case your product is unstable in case of water, then in some product when water content is on the higher side, you may observe that in drug product your impurity levels are gaining on the higher side. So these are very important for your drug substance. Your residual solvents, when you're synthesizing by using any organic solvents, what the limit you have set, that finally your drug substance will be having X amount of drug solvent. It should not vary too much. Inorganic impurities, your organic impurities, heavy metals, there are specifications for heavy metals, your lead, nickel, chromium. So those heavy metals, the regulatory agencies have set some limits that these should not be above that. Residue in ignition, your assay values. So all these values, all these parameters are critical attributes in terms of drug substance. When we talk about your drug product also, your appearance is very important, because today you are preparing a formulation which have X type of color, and in some days that color changes, so your specification will change. So that is very important. You should comply with the appearance. The identification, hardness, uniformity of dosage, I mean per unit dosage form, what is the uniformity of API content. The physical form, whether you are observing any cracks when you are keeping the tablets in the stability, is there any change in the physical form, or your XRD values, your polymorphic form is changing during stability. Your dissolution, for example, today in initial stages the dissolution was very good, but when you kept in stability after 6 months, the dissolution has retarded. So that will also be your quality attribute. Your degradation products, your water content, your assay values, your microbial limits. So these are critical quality attributes which are important for your drug product. So this will define whether your product is fine or not. Okay, so we have talked about CQAs, and you have already known that what are the CQAs for your drug substance, what are the CQAs for your drug product. So whenever you are submitting to the agencies that whichever CQAs you are going to put in your drug product, they will also ask for your justification, but whether that CQA is really important to you or not. But when you talk about this identification means whether the API is there or not. So it is very important. You will say yes, This is very important CQA for me, because if I am not able to identify the drug in my drug product, then maybe the safety and efficacy will hamper to the patients. The SA values. The SA value your target will be 100% of the label claim. Although the regulatory agency, they give you the confidence that you can use from 90 to 110, but you will say that I will target 100%, and whether it is it is a CQA or not, you will say yes, my CQA, this SA value is very critical, because if my SA values are changing, then it will affect safety and efficacy. The content uniformity. Content uniformity is very important, because unit to unit variability will be there if you have issues with your content uniformity. So you will say that this is very critical point for me, and it will affect the safety and efficacy to the patients. Dissolution. If you talk about dissolution, you have set a limit that in 30 minutes the dissolution should be more than 80%, and whether it is really a CQA, you will say yes, because if it fails to perform better in the dissolution, it will impact your bioavailability, because if the drug is not in a solution form, it will not be absorbed. So just to identify whether the drug is coming in the solution or in the media, you have set a limit of 80%, not less than 80% in 30 minutes, and it is a CQA. So basically all the chemical parameters which are important for your safety and efficacy, that will be your basic CQAs. And your friability, your score configuration, your size, order, appearance, this you will, during the manufacturing process, you will be identifying. Because for example, friability you cannot say this is my CQA, because it is a part of your manufacturing process. Whenever you are compressing the tablets, you need to check the friability, and it should be not more than 1%. So is that clear? The CQAs, which CQAs are important for a drug product? Then the CQA, the degradation of products, your impurity levels. So you will target your impurity levels as per the ICH guidelines, Q3A, Q3B, Q3C. So those are the guidelines as per the ICH. You will set those limits as per the ICH, and whether these limits are important, you will say yes, because if the product is degrading and there are some impurities in your drug product, it can cause some side effects to the patients. So that is important, your impurity levels and the limit that you have set. This is as per the ICH guideline, and whether it is CQA or not, yes, it is an important CQA. Then your residual solvents, in case you are using some solvents in your formulation and you are drying those solvents, your process is such a way that you want to lose those solvents in your finished final formulation. So the USP has set some guidelines, and they have set some limits of solvents. For example, if you are using IPA should not be more than 5000 ppm, parts per million. So the regulatory agencies, they have set some limits of these solvents, and it should not cross those limits. If it is well within those limits, then you will have the product that you are giving to the patient, it is safe. If there are solvents which are above those limits, that can be carcinogenic. For example, some solvents can be teratogenic. So your regulatory agencies have set some limits, and you should follow those limits. The water content, you are saying that water content should be less than 4%. So basically it is not a particular CQA, because you are controlling that moisture content in your formulation by your process. Microbial limits. So microbial limits or the microbial limit test, the pharmacopoeia has given some limits that it should not go beyond that from microbial limits. If it goes, it can cause side effects to the patients when the microbial limit increases from a particular limit. So this is your important CQA, you should monitor it. If you are not monitoring microbial limits, then it is not complying with the microbial limits that the regulatory agencies have told you. So basically it is a CQA, it is a major CQA. So talking about what are the major CQAs of any formulation, for example, immediately is your identification, your assay values, your content uniformity, your dissolution, your degradation of product, residual solvents, microbial limits. So these are your CQAs which will impact your safety and efficacy of your drug product. So we are clear about QTPP and CQAs. Now we have defined our QTPP, we have defined our CQAs. Then comes your risk management. You have designed your strategies. I mean, what will be your target, what will be your, how you can identify that whether you are complying with your target or not. So that was your CQA. Now the FDA tells about risk management. So whenever you are designing any formulation, you need to identify the risk. For example, you are going to buy any ticket, or you want to go to any hometown. So what are the risks which are there? I mean, first of all, whenever you are going to buy a ticket, the risk will be whether the ticket will be available or not. So this is, you have identified the risk, that the ticket will be available or not. So you will say that what is the probability of not finding, whether it is very high, that no, I will not able to find tickets because I am getting the ticket at the later stage, or you will say that the risk is medium because people may not go, or people are they are at their home, so I may be able to get the tickets. Or you will say the risk is very low because nobody is traveling, and I have full assurity that nobody will be buying the tickets, and when I will go to the counter, I will get the tickets immediately. So in this way, you have, even in the regular life, you evaluate the risk. For example, you are going for any examination. Tomorrow is your exam, or after 3 or 4 days you know that your exam is there. So you will see, I mean, what are the risk of me to fail. Okay, so on that risk you will say whether it is high. So if it is high, what should be my strategy if the risk is high that I will fail or I will pass. So you will study the main topics. If you say that my risk of failing is medium, why it is medium? Because I have studied in past also, and how to the risk, how I want to keep it from medium to low. How can I take the risk from medium to low? You will say that these things I have already studied. Somebody mic is on, please can you switch off your mic? Okay, so we were talking about if the chances of you are medium to fail. So why you have taken that chance? Why you are saying that it is medium? Because you know that you have already studied in the past, and there are few things that I have not studied. Because of that, I am saying that my chance of failing is medium. So you will target on those things, you will study those things, and then you will go for exams. And finally, when you say that the risk of failing in the exam is low, why? Because you have already done your homework, and you find it as a low risk, so you will not work, you will not think more about that. So that is what the risk management is. Whenever we are starting any project, we need to identify the risk in terms of everything, in terms of your raw material, in terms of your manufacturing process, in terms of your excipient that you are using, and at which concentration you are using. So when we talk about material, in terms of, you are identifying the risk in terms of your raw materials. So that is called your critical material attributes. You can write it critical material attributes. So all the risk which you will identify based on your material, that will be your critical material attributes. Then talking about your formulation, for example, you want to know that the ingredients that I am using, what is the range, or I mean, if I use different ranges, what are the risks involved in that? So that is your critical formulation variables. And then what are the risks associated with your process? So those will be based on your critical process parameters. The FDA defines risk management as a strategic safety program designed to decrease product risk by using one or more interventions or tools. It is a systematic process for assessment, control, communication, and review of risk to quality of drug product across the product life cycle. So whenever you are working on any risk, your target will be first identify the risk. You will identify the risk, you will analyze it. I mean, on what basis I need to analyze, and whether the risk is high, whether the risk is medium, whether the risk is low. And based on the risk, whichever the risk is low, you will not think about it. You will keep it as a low and you will not work upon it. But all the risks which are on the high or which are on the medium, you need to take action on that. And based on action that you have taken to minimize those risks, you will monitor them. Okay. And finally, when you get a fruitful result after monitoring, because you need to set a parameter also, whether the risk, how, when I told that this was my strategy, this was my action plan to reducing the risk, you need to monitor it also. When you have monitored, when you have reduced the risk, you will put a control. Control in what? For example, you are saying that you want to pass that exam. So in future exams, what you will put control is, you will study regularly, you will do revisions also. So this will be your control to reduce that risk. So am I clear about what is risk management? Risk management is, first of all, you need to identify, then you need to analyze whether the risk is high, medium and low, what are the actions that I need to take, how I need to monitor them, and once the risks are controlled, how I need to control it in future. So PBD is basically, first of all is you need to identify the targets. You need to have the CQAs. CQAs generally is what is your monitoring, how you are monitoring your product. Then your risk assessment. Risk assessment, in each terms, your materials also, your process also, and finally defining those risks which are high, medium and low. And what is the action plan on reducing those risks? That is called risk management. Now you will be asking me that we are talking about a risk is high, risk is low, risk is medium. Okay, but when we are saying only verbally, but how to put it on the written, that whether the risk is really high, whether the risk is really medium, or whether the risk is low. So there are some tools which are used to identify and to put down on paper that whether the risk is medium, whether the risk is high, or whether the risk is low. So the tool which we will discuss here is FMEA, Failure Mode Effect Analysis, FMEA. There are other tools also, but the most common and the most simplest is FMEA. FMEA stands for Failure Mode Effect Analysis. So basically, whenever we are working on a risk assessment, the tool we use is FMEA. And how to what we call rank the risk, that is by risk priority number, RPN. We call it risk priority number. Risk priority number is a multiplication of three things. First of all, the probability, second is your detectability, and the third is severity. So the RPN number is the multiplication of the probability score, the severity score, and your detectability score. Now you will be asking that what score it is, probability score, severity score, and your detectability score. Here is a table of, I have shared one example of FMEA. How actually these FMEA works in your pharmaceutical industry. We were talking about only as a realistic manner in a real life scenario, but how these FMEAs work as per the pharmaceutical industry. For example, now here I have evaluated the risk of my material attributes or your excipients, critical material attributes, CMA. Okay, first of all, I have evaluated my drug substance, particle size. Okay, First of all, I have taken particle size. The failure mode, what can be my failure mode? If I don't have a particular particle size of my drug substance, what will be the failure? The worst failure will be dissolution of finished product. I will not be able to achieve my dissolution, or what mode which I am talking about, whichever failure I am talking about, that is dissolution. Which failure will be evaluated? For particle size, I will see the dissolution. And what is the effect of failure? Effect of failure will be failure to achieve similar dissolution profile to the reference product, which ultimately leads to attain desired efficiency. If I am not getting a particular dissolution, I am not getting dissolution similar to my reference product, the efficacy will not be similar to my reference product, because my dissolution is not matching with the reference product. So when we talk about severity, I mean how severe is this if I am not getting my dissolution? I will rate it as 5, because it is very important. If I am not getting dissolution, I am not getting the particle size as desired particle size as what I need, so the severity will be high. It is very severe. The cause of failure. What can be the cause of failure? Change in particle size of API may impact dissolution, because we are saying that what failure we have, but why? What is the root cause behind that failure? It is because when we are changing the particle size, the dissolution will change. And then occurrence and probability. Occurrence probability means, in this case, whenever, for example, I am doing a dissolution with different particle size, what is the occurrence? I mean, if I am doing 5 times dissolution with different particle size, I know that whenever I am doing 5 times my dissolution will not be there. So in that case, the occurrence or the probability, it will be always 100%. I have 5 particle size API and I am doing the dissolution. Every 5 times when I do, I will have the worst result. So the occurrence or the probability of happening is 5. Then what you need to say, what are your current controls or preventives, what we call in terms of you, because in FMEA, whenever you are doing FMEA, you need to put the effect of failure, what are the causes of failure, and what are your current control measures. So for control measures, you will say that API with different PSD is available for development batches, ODD method for dissolution testing. What are the controls that you are putting at present? You have different API particle size to evaluate, and you have a particular dissolution method to see whether the product is failing or not. So these are your current control measures which you are taking. And the detectability I have kept is at 3, because we have a dissolution method with us as our current control, and we have different particle size to see the impact of particle size. So the detectability is 3. I mean, you can easily detect whether you are using, when you are using different particle size and you are seeing the effect on dissolution. So you are detecting it. So first of all, the severity, how severe. If you have different particle size, the severity obviously will be very high. The occurrence, yes, the occurrence will be very much. The probability of happening again and again will be high. And the detectability I have kept a bit 3. Why? Because I have the method with me in which I can able to detect whether it is passing or not. If in case you didn't have any method with you, the detectability will be very difficult for you. I mean, how will you detect whether you are getting the dissolution good or bad? So in this case, I have kept detectability of 3. So when we call about the RPN number here is 5 multiplied by 5 multiplied by 3, it is 75. So when we look back the ranges that we were talking, any RPN number which is less than 40, we will say that the risk is low. Any value which is between 40 to 99, it is medium risk, and any value which is above 99 or above 100, the risk is high. So which risk it is? Just type in the chat box. So based on the RPN, the risk is medium. So what will be our action plans to mitigate this risk? API with different particle size to be evaluated to study the impact on dissolution, and finally a suitable PSD limit shall be proposed in the API specifications. So what we mean is, to control this risk from medium to high, we will evaluate, first of all we will evaluate API with different particle sizes, and the results or the dissolution which we are getting as per our target based on the PSD which we used in our formulation, we will finalize our PSD of that API and we will put it as a API specification. So we will ask the vendor to only supply that API which is having a particular particle size. Okay. So similarly, diluent, how the diluent can impact. Diluent can impact your blend uniformity, your dosage unit. So effect of failure, if things goes bad, what will happen? Failure to attain blend uniformity or uniformity of dosage product will directly impact drug product efficacy. So whenever the blend uniformity will not be there, the tablet to tablet variations are there, your drug efficacy will not be there. So what are the causes? What can be the causes of that failure? Okay, particle size, concentration of diluent. So basically, when we talk about diluents, the severity will be less depending upon, because the blend that the diluent that you are using from a vendor, he is giving a excipient which have a uniform particle size, and they have controlled it from their specifications, they have controlled from their certificate of analysis. So the severity in that case will be very less, and also the occurrence will be very less, because you are getting the diluent from a vendor who has already been approved and who is supplying you the certificate of analysis with you. Detectability will be also 3, because you have your methods with you. So RPM will be 2 multiplied by 2 multiplied by 3 will be 12. So the risk is low. So you don't need to consider you don't need to evaluate the diluent effect on your blend uniformity or UOD, because you have already, based on the prior experience and based on the certificate of analysis from the vendor, you have already told that the risk is low. Similarly, the disintegrant, if we talk about disintegrant, how can they impact? Disintegration time and also your dissolution. So disintegrant that you are using, that can impact your DT, that can impact your dissolution. So what are the effects? Increase or decrease in DT will impact the dissolution and consequently efficacy of your product. If you are changing the disintegrant concentration, it will already impact your DT. So whether it can increase your DT or whether it can decrease your DT. So the severity in this case will be high, because disintegrant is a functional excipient. It will have more severity. If you are changing anything in the disintegrant, the severity will be high, 5. And whenever you are changing, and what are the probability of that those things to happen, it will be always high. So 5 is the severity, 5 is the occurrence, and detectability we have kept is low too, because whenever you are manufacturing the tablets, you are evaluating your disintegration time. So it will be an online monitoring kind of. You don't need to test it. If you are saying that the DT is changing, whenever you are manufacturing your tablets, during manufacturing you will see the DT, and the detectability will be good. You are having a good detectability. So when we talk about your RPA number 552, it will be 50. So your risk will be in the intermediate. So you need to work on this risk, whichever it is medium. So what you will work? What is your action plan for that? Suitable grade to be identified, and concentration of disintegrant will be optimized. How much concentration you need to use. Similarly for binders, we have kept the severity of 5, the occurrence of 5, and detectability of 3, and the RPN number comes to be 75. So the risk is here is also medium. So what is your action plan? Action plan will be, you need to optimize the concentration of your binder. So is that table clear to all of you? What is FMEA? Failure mode effect analysis. Only, for example, your CMAs that we were talking about, critical material attributes. For example, in case of your API, drug substance attributes, what are the drug substance attributes whenever you are having a certificate of analysis of a drug product? These are the tests which vendors tell you that these are my limits. For example, solid form, the particle size, they will tell you how much it is there. The hygroscopic studies, you have already identified in pre-formulation the solubility of the drug substance, the moisture content, the residual solvent, the process impurities, chemical stability, flow properties. So these are the drug substance attributes. But how they will impact your CQAs? For example, if you talk about assay, if your particle size distribution is not there, is not proper, it can impact your assay values. How? Because if the particles are very much coarse, they are bigger in size. So what it will do? It will not distribute properly in your blend or in your drug product. So you will have variations of assay values. So that is why, based on FMEA, we identified it as a medium risk. Then your chemical stability. If the product is unstable, so how it will impact your assay values? Your assay values will decrease, because if the impurities are increasing, the assay values will decrease. Your ultimate potency will decrease. If impurities are increasing, your assay values are decreasing. So it will have a high impact, and it will be high impact on the safety efficacy. Similarly, flow properties. If you are, for example, you are using direct compression process, and the flow properties of your API is not proper, the assay values, the risk on assay values will be medium based on your FMEAs. The particle size distribution on content uniformity. If the particle size is not uniform, it is coarser, then there are chances that your particles or the API can segregate in your blend, and it can cause issues with your content uniformity. Also, if the flow is not proper, also it can impact your content uniformity. I mean, tablet to tablet API uniformity will be not there. Then we call about dissolution. What are the attributes which are important to dissolution? For example, solid state form, or you call about the polymorphic form. There are some polymorphic forms which are soluble. There are some polymorphic forms which have different solubility. So if you are changing the polymorphic form, it can impact your dissolution. Similarly, particle size, solubility of that API will impact your dissolution. Your solid state can also impact your degradation, because different polymorphic form, different chemical properties, and different pathway of degradation. Your chemical stability. If the molecule is unstable, ultimately your drug product will be unstable. So these are CMAs of your drug substance. For example, we have taken one example. It is there. Now talking about the critical formulation variables. The critical formulation variables in terms of your formulation. Whatever your functional excipients are there, whatever your API is there, whenever you are changing any ratios, or you are changing the concentration, how it will impact your drug product CQAs. For example, drug substance PSD. As we already told, that it can impact your assay values, it can impact your content uniformity, it can impact your degradation, but PSD will not impact your drug product, so the risk will be low. Your excipient ratios, excipient NCC to lactose ratio, it can impact your assay values, it can impact your content uniformity, it can impact your dissolution, because here we see here MCC, microcrystalline cellulose, it is insoluble and lactose is soluble. So whenever we are changing the ratios of soluble and insoluble portion, the dissolution can impact, because more you put your insoluble part in your formulation, more it will take time for your dissolution. And then your MCC lactose ratio, and if you are changing the MCC lactose ratio, also it will affect your compressibility. I mean, if you are using high amount of MCC and less amount of lactose, your compressibility will be good. But if you are using higher lactose and less MCC, your compressibility of your granules will be less. So segregation can happen, and it can impact your content uniformity. If it is impacting your content uniformity, it can impact your assay values. Then CCS. CCS means cross carbonyl sodium. Okay, I just want to ask people basically from Kavya and this Nishant. Can you give me examples of super disintegrants? Do you understand what is super disintegrants? Nishant and Kavya? Okay. Nishant? Okay. So CCS basically it is a super disintegrant. So when we call about cross carbonyl sodium, it can impact if you are changing the ratios or the concentration of CCS, it can impact your dissolution. Talc will not have any much impact on your CQAs. Magnesium stearate, which is a lubricant, generally after blending we have to do the lubrication. So your stearate levels can impact your dissolution, because since it is hydrophobic in nature, the water penetration, it can impact your water penetration in your granules, and ultimately being a hydrophobic, putting a hydrophobic layer on your granules, it can retard your dissolution. So the impact will be high. Similarly, degradation product, magnesium stearate, sometimes there are some incompatibilities of some excipient, for example stearate with your API. So based on drug excipient compatibility, you can say that whether the stearate will impact your degradation or not. So in this particular case, we had seen in your drug excipient compatibility studies that whenever you increase the concentration of stearate, the impurity level increases. So in this case, we have kept this medium. So is it clear? I mean, for critical formulation variables, what are these and how can it can impact? Okay. So those were the risks that we have identified. So earlier I told you that first we need to do the QTPPs, the quality target product profile, then your CQAs, then your CPPs, CMAs, CFPs. So all those things that we have identified as high or medium, we need to monitor those. We need to put those risks from medium to low or high to low. So in order to put those risks, we need to prepare a design space. Design space means what are the levels that you need to be evaluating to reduce that risk. But in this case, for example, when we are talking about formulation variables, as we know, we have already put earlier drug substance PSD, the disintegrant percentage, your MCC. So basically this is a software design of experiment in which we can evaluate multiple factors at a single time. Generally what we do in normal cases, we evaluate one factor and then we see the response. But in By use of design of experiments, what we use, we can use multiple factors, and we can evaluate those multiple factors at a single point of time. For example, in this case, we have evaluated three factors simultaneously: your drug substance PSD, your disintegrant, and your MCC lactose combination. And what are the levels that we are using? For example, your D90. If we talk about particle size, what we are using is the minimum level we are using 10 D90 10 micron, and maximum level what we are using is D90 30 micron, and the medium level is 20 micron. Similarly, when we talk about disintegrant, whenever we are working for any disintegrant, we generally take around 1 to 5%. That is the limit we generally use. So similarly, in this case, what we have done, the minimum level which we will be studying is 1%, the zero level we are using 3%, and maximum 5%. And similarly, lactose combination, what is the ratio? I mean, in terms of your percent MCC in your MCC lactose combination, one is 33, in which you are using less MCC. One is 50-50, I mean you are using same ratio of MCC and lactose 50, and in one case in which you are using higher quantity of MCC. So these are formulation variables, these are levels that you are using. And whenever you are using this software, I mean in today's topic we will not be covering this software, we will just go through what are the major aspects of that software. I have already told that in this software we use multiple factors and multiple levels: minimum, optimum, and high level. And what are the response that you need? Response means what are the results that you are expecting, and what are the responses that you want to evaluate from this particular set of permutation combination. All these permutation combination that you are using, what are the response you need to identify? For example, I need to identify, if I use certain kind of ratios, what is my dissolution in 30 minutes, okay, what is the disintegration time, what is the tablet content uniformity, what is the assay values, how was the powder blend flow coefficient, and then the tablet hardness. This is the the pressure that you have kept on your machine. If I put certain kind of pressure on the machine, that will be my hardness. For example, in machine you have put 10 kilonewton of force on when you are doing the compression. What was your tablet hardness? So these are your what you call your whenever you are putting some kind of pressure in your machine, what hardness you are getting. Then what is the friability that you are getting at particular pressure. When you are applying a kind of pressure on your machine, what friability you are getting. So these are the goals. I mean, if you talk about dissolution, your goal will be maximum. You want maximum dissolution in 30 minutes. And then your disintegration time, you want disintegration time minimum of, you want to minimize your disintegration time. That is your goal. Your content uniformity, that should be minimum RSD, means the standard deviation or the relative standard deviation, the tablet to tablet uniformity should be less. I mean the tablet to tablet uniformity variation should be on the minimum side. The assay values should be 100%. So these are your goals which you are keeping. And then degradation of product. After 3 months, the degradation should be minimized. So these are the set of variables you are using. These are the levels that we use in the software. These are the response that you will take, and you will tell the software that these are my goals, and then you will perform these activities. You will perform these experiments in your lab, and whatever response you are getting, you need to put it in that software. For example, whenever you are using D90, for example 20 micron you are using, and you are using disintegrant 5%, and you are using the combination of MCC lactose at 50%. So what was your response? You need to put it in the software. Whatever the result you are putting, you will have to put it in the software, because software you will run the experiment as per this, and you have to put the response in the software. Based on the response that you are getting and based on your goals, you will be able to identify that which particle size if I use, which will be better, which disintegrant if I use, which will be better, which ratio of MC selector is going to be better. So this all you have to put in the software. Similarly, in case of gradient and lubricants, your magnesium stearate concentration, your talc concentration, you will evaluate two factors at three levels. So basically, when you talk about factors and levels, these are three factors and it is three levels. Here it is two factor and it is three levels. Similarly, your responses, what will be your responses? Tablet appearance, how will be the tablet appearance if I use particular concentration stearate? What is the tablet cooling appearance? Do I find any picking or sticking? So your goal will be minimum picking and sticking. Ejection force, whenever you are using a stearate will, whenever you are increasing the concentration of stearate, it helps to increase your ejection force. What is the tablet hardness? What is the dissolution? What are the tablet content uniformity? So basically this is your design space. Design space means based on your prior knowledge and based on your risk assessment, what trials you are going to do. So this is your design space, and the software which we are referring to is design of experiment. But we will not discuss about that software because the conversation will go very lengthy. But what are the things that we need to input in it? Basically your levels we need to put, and your goals you need to identify, your response you need to put in the software, and the results that you will be getting. So here, whatever results that you have observed, for example, these were the formulation variables and these were the levels that you were taking. So the software will say that you have to take 11 batches in which each and every factor will not be repetitive. For example, in one case 30 micron was there of the particle size, the disintegration level was 1% and the MCC was 66%. So this value will not repeat again. So there will be different permutation combinations, and the response you will put it here. Whatever the results you are getting, you will input here. For example, when I was using particle size which was on the higher side, which was a bit coarser, and MCC was also higher. So we know that when you are doing the dissolution in that case, also the disintegration level is very less. So you can see the minimum dissolution you have observed. This is from your practical observation, you have kept it. So when you talk about, see where you have found the maximum disintegration or maximum dissolution. If you see the particle size, where the particle size was less and the disintegration level was high, you observe 99%. Similarly, because although it is MCC, you are using only higher concentration, but you have particle size which is very less, and you are eroding the tablets very fast. So that is why your dissolution was high. Similarly, in case of, you see here, particle size is very less, although the disintegration time is less, but since you are using soluble fillers, you are having a dissolution on the higher side. Okay. So this is what. So based on this, we get a kind of overlay plot. Overlay plot is what is the what we say, the relationship between your disintegrant level and the relationship between your PSD level. So whatever it is there in the green, this is meeting your goals. So whenever you are using a particle size less than 30 and particle size is around 10 micron, then you are having a response which is green, whichever the response that you have kept. So green zone is all responses meet the predetermined criteria, and the gray zones are one or more response failed to meet the predetermined criteria. So is it clear from this image? The idea of showing these kind of design space is to have you an idea that how the design space works. It is not necessary that we need to use software. The regulator doesn't say that you have to use the software. You can do it manually also. I mean, you can just design your formulations in such a way. The variables you can design one factor at a time also you can use. I mean, by using one concentration of disintegrant at 3 levels and only study one factor at a time. For example, you are studying disintegrant at a time, so you need to keep other parameters same, other excipients same, and you need to just change the concentration of disintegrant and you can see the response. So that is also possible. But in this case, I have explained you if you are talking about multiple factors by using the softwares. So similarly, in case of your stearate and talc that we used, I mean, what were the responses that were observed when we are talking about the less concentration of stearate and high amount of talc? The tablet appearance doesn't look good, and whenever you are using less concentration of your stearate, there are appearance on the tablets that they are sticking or on the punches. And also the ejection force, I mean how much force it takes for the punches to eject the tablets. So whenever there is less lubricant in your tablets, the ejection force will be high. So similarly, in case of when you talk about when you are using the magnesium stearate from range to 0.6% to 0.9%, in that case you are not seeing any kind of peaking or sticking. And also the ejection forces are pretty good. I mean, they are on the lower side, means the machine does not have to put extra force to eject the tablets from the lower punches. So finally, based on our responses and our goals, whatever the risk which was on the medium or the high, and based on our response and finalized formulation, we have updated the risk from medium to low or high to low. So this is how the risk assessment works. First of all, you need to identify the risk, you need to monitor, you need to evaluate that risk, and then once you have finally monitored it, you will update the risk from high to low or medium to low. Similarly, in case of critical process parameters, when you talk about the process parameters which are important, for example in case of roller compaction, when you talk about the process, for example before your dry granulation you will need to do the blending process. So how the blending process can impact your product assay values, which is medium, the content uniformity levels, it can impact high, the dissolution also. I mean, if you are doing over lubrication before the compaction process, it can impact your dissolution. Your roller compaction, when you are doing the dry granulation process, how can it impact? It can impact if you are the press force or the granules which are not too much hard and there are so much segregation of particle size, there are so many bigger particles and smaller particles, your content uniformity can impact. And if your the particles are or the granules are very hard, it can impact your dissolution. Similarly, after doing your roller compaction, you have to do the milling process in which the granules which are milled. Also, the size of the particles can impact your assay values, your content uniformity values. The size of the granules can impact the dissolution. your final blending and lubrication. Lubrication can impact your dissolution. Finally, when you are compressing the tablets, if you are compressing the tablet at much higher speed, there are chances that it can impact your blend. It can segregate, so that can impact your assay values. And if the assay values of tablets, they are impacting, if you are using at very high speed and the segregation is happening, it can impact your content uniformity, your hardness of the tablets during compression, that can impact your dissolution. So you will evaluate these parameters. Similarly, as we studied with the formulation, you will create a design space. For example, blending process, you will do the blending at different time points. For example, you will do blending from a range of 5 to 15 minutes, and you will see the impact on your tablet assay values, your content uniformity values, your dissolution values. And finally, when the parameter which is in accordance to your goal, you will select it, and finally you will reduce the risk from high to low or medium to low. Similarly, for roller compaction, this is a broad term, roller compaction, but in roller compaction there are several parts. So based on that, for example, the milling, there are some kind of small oscillator granulator is there, OG, which breaks the flakes in your small particles. So that speed can impact your content uniformity. So you will evaluate that speed. The press force, how hard you are creating the granules. So you will evaluate the press force, low press force, medium press force, high press force. You will evaluate, and based on that you will see which is optimum press force for your granules to get a desired dissolution. On that case, you will, on your control strategy, you will put it, finally you will reduce the risk. Similarly, the milling process means which size of mill you are using, what is the speed of that milling process. So you will evaluate different mill size, you will study the speed of different mill, you will select which RPM, at what RPM if I am doing my milling process, it will be optimum for my product. So you will reduce the risk. Then your final blending, your lubrication process, finally your lubrication, how much lubrication you need, whether you need 3-minute lubrication, whether you need 5-minute lubrication, which lubrication time is optimum to get your desired dissolution. And once you have finalized that, you will put it as a low. Similarly, your compression, your speed, you will challenge different speed, 10 rpm, 15 rpm, 25 rpm. Then you will evaluate your assay values, content uniformity values, dissolution values. You will see, for generally your speed, you will evaluate assay and content uniformity. And if you are talking about your tablet hardness, then you will evaluate your dissolution. So once you have evaluated from the design space, and once you have finalized that these are the parameters that I will keep for my compression, in that case you will update your risk to low. So this is how the industry works. First of all, you need to identify this, then you have to rank it, and then how those medium and low risk you need to mitigate. So finally, the control strategy. The control strategy is a planned set of controls derived from current product, and process understanding that assures performance and product quality. The control can include parameters and attributes related to drug substance and drug product material and component, facility, equipment operation conditions, in-process control, finished product specifications and all. So whatever the control that you are putting, either it may be your material, whatever controls you are putting on your material, whatever controls you are putting in your formulation, whatever controls you are putting in your process, and it can also be in terms of your specifications. I mean, what are the set of specifications, what are the limits of my assay values that I need to keep, that can also be a part of your control strategy. So this is one example of control strategy. In this case, for example, we were using this API, acetyltryptophan polymorphic foam. So you have kept your polymorphic form that this is my control strategy and this will be my 2 theta values for your whatever whichever you have studied for your lab scale, and then what you studied for your pilot scale, and what is proposed for your commercial scale. So basically control strategy, what they do is whenever whichever studies you have done in your lab scale and pilot scale, based on that what you are being proposing for your commercial batches or the batches which are you are going to give to the patients. So in this case, since we have not studied too many polymorphic form, we have studied only one, so we will propose the same polymorphic form for your commercial batches. Similarly, particle size, initially we studied different particle size in the lab scale, then when you took the pilot batch or the batch which was used for your bioequivalence studies, this was your batch, and based on this PSD, D90, D50 and D10 for future commercial batches, you have set this specification. If I am not getting this API, I will not manufacture my batch. To get consistent result, you have specified a control strategy. Similarly, when I was talking about formulation variables, we will not change because formulation variables you have already kept as a final. But yes, the raw material whichever is coming, we are not talking about the formulation variables because formulation variables we have fixed that in my formulation I will only use 5%. I will not keep it 3% to 5%. This is fixed. Formulation variable will be fixed. It will not be a part of your control strategy. But the excipients, the inactive ingredients that you are taking from the vendor, you need to take his commitment that whatever excipient I will be using, it should be within this range. If I talk about lactose, the lactose that I am getting from the vendor, I studied in the lab from 70 to 100 micron, and what I got from for the exhibit batches or the filing batches, I used 85 micron. But when I used 70 to 100 micron, I didn't find any issues with my product process, so I will keep it as 70 to 100. This is, I think, miswritten. It is not 10, it is 100. So from vendor we will take commitment for every commercial batches that I will be manufacturing. I need this lactose and this particular grade with this particle size. Similarly for your MCC, similarly for your disintegrate, you will take his commitment. Similarly for your talc and magnesium stearate. And for this is for your critical material attributes, and then this is for your process. I mean, whenever you are doing the blending process, how much blending time will be there. For example, you have set 10 minutes in the lab batches, and whatever you have used on your exhibit batches, you based on the scale up parameters, you told that 12 rpm will be there, and then what will be a final one. Similarly, how much blender fill level, I mean, if you are filling the blend in the blender, how much fill it is there, how much percentage of blend is filled in that blender. You studied the range of 35 to 75 in your lab batches, and you didn't find any issue if I'm putting the blend in the range of 35 to 75. So in exhibit batches you use 74%, and your proposed will be whatever batch size you are proposing for the commercial batches, it should fall within that range that you have specified. So are we did we get the idea of control strategy? I mean, why we need control strategies? Have we become aware of control strategies? Okay. So similarly, this control strategy is for your compaction process. For example, your in roller compaction there are different sub parameters. Your roller pressure force, how much pressure force you are using, and based on which size which you will use for your commercial batches. So that control strategy you have kept to get your desired granules, desired uniformity and desired critical quality attributes. Final blending, V-blend blender, how much occupancy you used in your lab scale, what was for your exhibit batches and what you are proposing for your commercial batches. So these control strategies that should be a part of your product development report. Control strategy basically whatever range that you studied for your lab scale, then what the scale that you use for your submission batches, and then what are the proposed ranges based on the lab scale and pilot batches, what are the proposed range for your commercial batches as a part of control strategy, so that whichever result you were getting in your lab scale, whatever results you were getting which you got for the submission batches, these results will be same in your commercial batches also. So there is less chances of batch to batch variability in future batches. So for example, rotatory press, I mean the compression machine, in which you told that in the lab batches you used 80 to 20 rpm, and between 80 to 20 rpm you told that your product is able to qualify your critical quality attributes, your SA value, your CU values, your drug release values were consistent. So also in commercial range, commercial process, you can say that I can use from 80 to 20 rpm, whatever, whichever you feel you have given here. The press speed, the pre-compression force, decompression force, all those you will put in your control strategy for your future batches. And finally, your final release specifications, in which you will finalize your specifications that if by any chance the product is out of these specifications, then you will not release your product. Description will be there, identification will be there, SA values you have kept on the stringent values 95 to 105, then your content uniformity values. AB, by content uniformity we usually measure with AB, it should be less than 15. Acceptance value, this is AB means your acceptance values, it should be less than 15. Then your dissolution you have set specification of not less than 80% in 30 minutes, and you have also put the media, whatever media you are using. Your degradation product, how much impurities should be there, or how much impurity should not be more than 0.5%. This one is AC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 particle impurity, individual unknown impurity, total impurities, residual solvent. So these are your final release specifications, which you will also keep as a control strategy as a part of your product filing. So these were the references that I took, and I will be sharing this slide to you also, so that you can just have a look. For the first time things becomes a bit critical, I can understand from a student perspective who are in the third year or the fourth year, but believe me, once you again go through these slides, and also if you can ask questions by getting those some queries to me, and by attending today's lecture you will be surely getting a good amount of knowledge about QBD, what are your QTPPs, what are your CQAs, what is your risk assessment, how we identify the risk, whether it is medium, whether it is low, or whether it is high, and what is design space. Even these terms are very important for you. Not going too much into the deep, but yes, the basics should be very clear.